National Air and Space Museum, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the National Air and Space Society's annual Vice Admiral Donald D. Engen Flight Jacket Night here in the Lockheed Martin IMAX Theater. But before I go any further, a little departure from the script, I might note that those of us wearing flight jackets might feel all Sierra Hotel, but who by show of hands is wearing a NASA flight jacket with an Apollo patch? Anyone? Enough said. Colonel Worden, you get the bragging rights. We're so glad to have you here tonight because as society members, you demonstrate to us that you recognize the value that the museum brings in telling amazing stories of human flight, space exploration, and planetary science to inspire the next generation of innovators and explorers. As the video we just played shows, and you surely saw on your way in, we are in the midst of a massive renovation project that will transform all 23 of our galleries and public spaces. Support from the National Air and Space Society ensures that we can use our existing and new spaces to engage 21st century audiences with programs and events that will awe and inspire them. You also make programs like tonight possible. So thank you for your ongoing support of America's favorite museum. I did want to note that this year marks the 20th anniversary of the passing of the man for whom this lecture is named. Donald Engen followed an illustrious military and civil career by serving as the director of this museum. In his tenure, attendance grew by 30%, and he helped strengthen relationships with military and veterans groups, among many other accomplishments. So it's fitting we get to honor him each year with this marquee lecture named in his honor. It is also appropriate that tonight we get to hear from another key player in the museum's history, that is Dr. Farouk Elbaz. Before we were fortunate enough to have him join the museum, he played a vital role in the Apollo program. When Apollo 11 landed in the Sea of Tranquility on the moon, it was because he had provided the scientific data on why it was right to land at that very location. He also trained the astronauts on what to look for when they were collecting lunar samples. At the museum, Farouk founded the Center for Earth and Planetary Studies. This is our incredible research unit that produces groundbreaking discoveries and includes staff working on multiple NASA programs. His creation of CEPS means we have insights we can share with our visitors that are unique among aerospace museums. So we're very fortunate to have Farouk here tonight and to have him introduce our featured speaker, one of those very Apollo astronauts that Farouk supported, Colonel Al Worden, who was the command module pilot on Apollo 15. While Farouk will tell you more about Al, I just want to add it's always amazing to hear from only one of 24 people who have ever flown to the moon. Their perspectives are truly unique, and they always help us to better understand our place in the universe. Today also has a special connection to the Apollo program, as it's the 50th anniversary of the launch of Apollo 12, which Al will discuss as he was a backup crew for that mission. So to let you know more about our guest, please join me in welcoming, or more appropriately, welcoming back to the museum, Dr. Farouk Elbaz.
Good evening, fellow members of the museum. I'm delighted to be here, and I came specifically so I can see Al Worden, to greet him and to tell you all that he was basically, and without any doubt, my very best student.
You have to say that.
Yes. Al and I had incredible fun during the Apollo missions, during the training times. And he was an exceptional person that with a broad interest in all kinds of things. He named his spacecraft Endeavour. He was intent on saying greetings from Endeavour in so many languages. He was a man that you would wish him to be your friend or your husband, for that matter. He always wanted to make absolutely certain that we use the time on the Apollo program to get the best possible information we can, and to make absolutely certain that everybody in the world has a piece of that. And to this day, he's still doing that. He's still traveling to China. He was just telling me about his missions to the United Arab Emirates and all kinds of other places. So he continues to do that, to be an informative man to inform everyone in the world about the wonderful things about the universe and the wonderful things about learning things about the missions and so on. And he and I became very good friends during the training for the missions, for his mission, as I was training the Apollo astronauts in general and the ones that flew around the moon in particular, so to look at the surface of the moon, bring in information, and take photographs of the proper places. He was the very best observer. He brought in information from the moon that could not be acquired in any other way, because it was really his ability to observe things, to look at them, and to interpret them. And because he also had kind of an artistic view about himself and a linguistic ability, he could describe these things very beautifully, and became the best person to actually observe things on the moon and convey it. During his mission, actually, he looked at a specific place that I had talked to him about it before, and he started talking about it and explaining things that he saw. And he said, we'll see many cinder cones. These remind me of the things that we flew over in Arizona. So I could sit, while I'm sitting there listening to this, I could visualize what he's saying. And there's also black soot around it, meaning that it is maybe basaltic material. So this is the kind of thing that would have come from volcanic activity, and that all of this kind of very interesting information geologically, but also said in a wonderful way. I will never forget that, because the Apollo program director, Dr. Rocco Petrone, who was a great man, the greatest man from the Apollo missions altogether, came down from where he was in the last row in this theater, came down all the way to where I was in the Mission Control Center, and he said, Farouk, I think your student may have picked up a landing site for you. And he went right back. And indeed, that site that Al had described became the landing site for Apollo Mission 17, because of the way he described it, the way he kind of excited the geological people in general about what we might find in this site that he was describing while he flew over it during the Apollo 15 mission. So it's wonderful to introduce Al Wardland to you, as we had a great deal of fun doing the training. I would go, and for instance, he would tell me that he's going to Downey, California, and maybe we can do a little bit of visual observations over the places, the sites that we fly over from Houston to LA. So I do that. So I sit down with the maps, the geological maps of the US, and pick up certain spots that he would very likely to fly over, and he would take them, and I will go to Houston, tell them about it, and he would take my information and his cameras and so on, and then I would fly that night to LA, wait for him. They come to LAX. There is a section that the military uses in LAX, the airport in Los Angeles, and I'd be waiting for them with my notes and my knowledge of the geology, and then wait for him to see how is he going to describe that for me as a geological observer. And goddamn, he would. And he would do it very well. So I had no question about his ability to do this very beautifully, and he did. And he did it also with flavor, with pizzazz, because of his ability in language and his interest in the humanness of things that we look at and things we describe. So I'm delighted to see Al here, and I'm certain that you will enjoy him very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. As you might imagine, we've been friends for a long time now. I have to tell you, well, a couple of things before I start the slideshow. First off, I'd like to say something about the Air and Space Museum. This is the most visited museum in the world. And it's a wonderful, wonderful thing for the young people of the world who see this, who get excited about some of the things that are here. I'm in the same line of work. I like to get young people excited about the future, excited about science, technology, engineering, and math. And as a matter of fact, I do have my own scholarship program where we're bringing foreign students to Space Camp to try and promote some of these things that I think are so important to our future. These young people out there are the future. Make no mistake about it. And the way things are going here on Earth, sometimes I wonder how well we're doing and where we're going. And so I think it's doubly important that we get these young people going in the right direction. I think that's critical to us. So I think the National Air and Space Museum is absolutely a perfect place for young people to see, to get excited about flying. I mean, yeah, it's not just about space, it's about flying too. But there's also space here, and I think that's awfully important. Let me just say a word about Farouk. Farouk and I have been friends for a long, long time. He was my geology instructor for my flight. I will tell you, if any of you have seen the television series From Earth to the Moon, anybody seen that? All right, there's one whole hour devoted to me doing geology fieldwork, right? Only problem was I have never flown a Cessna 172. And when I did fly over the geology site, Farouk was never with me in the airplane. So there are a couple of things. So you have to be a little bit careful when you see something on TV because you have to understand what's true and what's not true. Farouk also is responsible for the name on our spacecraft. One day coming down to, I guess coming to Houston, I forget what it was, Houston or the Cape. He came through Reagan Airport and he picked up a book on old explorers, and he got this one book that he showed us. We were looking for a name for our spacecraft, and he got this one book, and we were looking through it, and here is Captain Cook, a British sailor who sailed a sailing ship called the Endeavour to the South Pacific for the first scientific voyage to the South Pacific. And we thought that was absolutely appropriate for our flight because we felt like we were making the first scientific flight to the moon, okay? So that was the name of our spacecraft. We named the lunar module the Falcon because we were 3 Air Force guys. I have to tell you, we were the backup crew on Apollo 12. What a hoot. Those guys were unbelievable. They were all 3 Navy, we were all 3 Air Force. So you can imagine the kind of problems we got into along the way. I have to tell you just, I lived with Dick Gordon for 1.5 years, practically. We went everywhere together. And I have to tell you just about one small incident and the kind of guy that Dick Gordon was. As you all know, the Apollo 12 crew's gone now. I mean, they're not with us anymore. Dick was probably my best friend in the program. And we went everywhere together for 1.5 years while I was his backup. We went to El Paso. Well, we were going to LA one day, and we landed in El Paso to get refueled. And we did what we call hot refueling. All you guys that were out of the Navy will know what that means. But that means you don't shut your engine down when you're getting refueled, which is kind of a no-no in the Air Force, but we did it anyway because we weren't Air Force anymore. And so we opened the canopy, and the little ground crew guy came out, and he was a little Spanish guy, and he brought us a couple of tacos, and so we had some tacos while we're getting refueled. But we get ready to go. We were on our way out to the runway, and when he closed the canopy, it came off the hinges in the back, so we couldn't fly that airplane. Okay? So we go back to the fixed base operation, and we tell them what our problem was, and they got us a van. We went over to the commercial terminal. Of course, we're in flight suits and flight jackets, And you never leave a parachute in an airplane, so we had our parachutes and we had them on. And our helmets with our oxygen masks were in a bag, and we took those in our hanging bag in the other hand. We go over to the commercial terminal, and interestingly, there happened to be a Pacific Southwest airline flight about ready to go to LA from there. So they put us on that airplane, and when we got on the airplane, they put us up in the front row, okay, right up in first class. Well, they didn't have first class, but the front row. So Dick and I are sitting there. We got our flight suits and our jackets on. We got our helmets. Well, we didn't have the helmets on yet, but we had our parachutes on. So we get strapped in, and pilot starts the airplane. He starts taxiing out to the runway, and Dick's looking at me and said, "Okay, now it's time." So we put on our helmets and our oxygen masks. And you will not believe the hubbub that occurred in the airplane behind us, because everybody got they freaked out, because here are these two guys with parachutes and helmets and oxygen masks on. And the question was, "Why'd you do that?" And they said, "Well, you never know. We might have to use them." Anyway, that's the kind of relationship I had with Apollo 12, and they were like family to me, I have to tell you. Now, let me talk a little bit about me and Apollo 15. I was not one of those who, when I was a little kid, thought that space was the thing for me. Never really gave it much thought. I grew up on a farm, and the way to get away from that farm, I ran the farm from the time I was 12 until I was 18, until I went to college, right? And I made a resolution along the way that I was going to get as far away from that farm as I could get. Never really anticipating or realizing where that might be, but that was my feeling. My parents did not have enough money to send me to college, so I worked very hard to get an appointment to West Point. I went to West Point. Back in the days when we did not have an Air Force Academy. 1/3 of the students from Annapolis and 1/3 from West Point went to the Air Force to even out the three branches. So I went to West Point. I graduated a long time ago. I hate to even think about it, 55 years ago. But I never thought about space. There was Buck Rogers and all that kind of stuff going on, but I was not one of those who was captured with space. So I go in the Air Force, and I fly, and I go back to college, and I go to test pilot school, and then I teach in a test pilot school out at Edwards for a while, and still had not really given space much of a thought. But while I was at Edwards teaching, NASA had a selection cycle for a group that they would call the Apollo astronauts, okay? It was going to be for lunar flights. And I thought, I got nothing to lose. All they can do is turn me down. I got the job I want anyway. So I'm in a great shape. And lo and behold, I got selected. There were 19 of us who got selected out of about 830. I have to tell young people today that things are changing a little bit. You can be the best student in the world, but your odds of getting into NASA to become an astronaut today are getting pretty minuscule. The last selection program, there were 18,000 applicants, and they picked 12. So those are the odds. You got to not only be good at what you do, but you got to have a little luck along the way too. I talk about a lot about the training. In fact, we're going to talk about the training in the Apollo program here in a minute. But the training doesn't start when you get to NASA. The training starts when you go through school. That's where it all begins. And you got to have a track record of good academics to get into NASA. And then when you get there, you find that everything you do is training. Training. You never get out of training. You never get out of learning. That is a continuous process, and I try and live up to that even today, because I think it's terribly, terribly important. Okay, now I'm going to do something a little different in my talk tonight. I have to give you a little background on this, though. We flew to the moon in July and August of 1971. We were gone just short of 13 days. As a command module pilot, it was my job to taxi, if you will, Dave and Jim out to the moon and let them off and go down to the surface, and then if they were good to me, I could pick them up and bring them back home. okay? Almost 13 days in space. And that's kind of the culmination of the training program. But what I found, we conducted our flight a little differently than had been done before. Normally, there's a certain number of scientific experiments that are expected that a crew will do while they're on their flight. And these are all kind of judged and put on the flight plan by the managers at NASA. And there's kind of a nominal workload, if you will, a certain number of things you do. I think every crew, every flight probably had lots and lots of other experiments that were kind of sent to them to see if they would do them, and they kind of kept this to a level that would be comfortable to complete during the flight. We accepted almost every scientific investigation that was sent to us. If let's say a normal load of science that was done on a flight was 100%, we had 125%. Because our thinking was that it's easier to take something off the flight plan than it is to add it. So that's what we did. On our flight, we did everything. Because we had the attitude that we're only going to come this way once, and we better do every single thing we can. So I think that's one of the reasons why we are even today considered one of the scientific, a scientific flight. Let's see, what do we got up here? Oh, well, let's get rid of that mug. Are we working? Did it go? Oh, yeah. Okay, crew on Apollo 15, Dave Scott, Jim Irwin, and myself. I won't go into all the details. I just want to tell you one thing. See that crew patch? That's the best one in the program. No question about it. I love that crew patch. But I got to tell you a little story about it, because you might not ever have heard this. We had lots and lots of designs submitted to us. We didn't like any of them. So we went to a friend of a friend who happened to be an Italian dress designer by the name of Emilio Pucci. Some of you recognize the name, right? He was very famous for designing ladies' clothes in silk and with all the pastel colors and swirly this and that and the other thing. But he was also a graduate of college here in this country. He went to University of Georgia, got a degree in agricultural engineering. When he went back to Italy, he took a fancy to flying, and he started flying. And he flew through World War II. Never got shot down that I know of. But he finished World War II as a fighter pilot in the Italian Air Force. And then he did, I guess, what all Italian fighter pilots wanted to do. He got into ladies' clothes. And probably more successfully than a lot of the others, I would think. But anyway, because of his aviation background, we asked him to help us with the patch. And he sent us one that was rectangular with little fluted corners, of course. Little fluted corners, all in pastel colors. But what he gave us were the 3 birds flying over the lunar surface. So we took those, made the patch circular, red, white, and blue. And we put the landing site, a picture of the landing site, in front of the birds. And now I got to go off again on another tangent. NASA headquarters had told us we could not use Roman numerals on our patch. We didn't like that. Hi, Bob. We didn't like that. I think the reason was that as the numbers got bigger and bigger, Roman numerals get pretty long. Okay, if you ever look at the year that a motion picture is made, I swear I can never figure it out. Okay, it's too long. And I suspect that's why they said it. We didn't like that. So if you look behind the tail of the birds on this crew patch, you will see a very interesting item. Can you see that? It's an X and a V in shadow. We had to rearrange the craters. And we had to have the sun shining from both directions. But we got our X and V on our crew patch. Okay? Roman numeral 15. We sent this patch to NASA headquarters, fully expecting they'd see what we had done, and they would slap our wrists and say, no, no, you can't do that, you got to take it off. Well, surprise, surprise, it came back approved. So we have the last Roman numeral on an Apollo patch, okay? Training. Our training started 3 years before the flight when we were assigned as a backup crew on Apollo 12. So I spent 3 years of training just for the flight, but that doesn't tell you the whole story. I had 24 years of military service, and I figured one day that 18 of it was in training. I only spent about 5, 6 years actually flying and paying for my commission with the Air Force. The rest of the time I was in training. I was in college, I was in test pilot training, I was teaching test pilots, and also getting it myself. So after 18 years of military training, I get to NASA, and now I got 3 years of training getting ready for my flight. A year and a half on Apollo 12, and then a year and a half after that. Now, the training for Apollo 12 was different because when we trained for Apollo 12, we trained almost exclusively on what it would take to fly that spacecraft out there and get it back safely. The rest of it, if we had to fly like Jack Swigert did on Apollo 13, that's the breaks. That's the way it goes. The last year and a half, we really focused on the science that we're going to do. And so we spent most of our time training on the science. That's not to say that we let the flying of the spacecraft go by, because over that 3-year period, I spent 25% of my time in a simulator, learning how to keep current and keep going with a simulator. That's kind of the training, and that's what I tell young people, is that there's nothing in life that's easy. You know, it's a long, long road, and you really got to be dedicated to pursue your dreams and to get where you want to go. All right, now we're going to we're going to do something different. I'm going to read poetry. I did not write any of this on the flight. A lot of people have asked, oh, did you write that while you were on the flight? I said, no, I was too damn busy on the flight to write any poetry. All I could do was look out the window and see things and do what I had to do. But a strange thing happened to me after I got off the flight. When we came back, I had my parents living with me in my apartment across the street from the Manned Spacecraft Center back then, which is now the LBJ Space Center. I'd get up in the morning and I'd go debrief. We'd debrief for 8, 10 hours a day, and then I'd go home and there'd be a party going on, right? Every single day there's a party. At midnight, I'd kick everybody out, and I'd go to bed, and I'd get up in the morning, go through debriefing another 8 or 10 hours. Did that for 2 weeks. I got to tell you, I would never be able to describe how exhausted I was at the end of the 2 weeks. I was exhausted after the flight because we really put out on the flight. But 2 weeks of debriefing and all that after the flight, I was totally exhausted. And I think that had something to do with it. Because I'm sitting in my apartment one night with no lights on, and all these thoughts started coming through my mind. I got a legal pad and I started writing this stuff down. And this is the way it came out. Training. I think we got to get one more slide going here. Whoop. I think we've somehow we skipped. There we are. Training is endless. It takes all my days. Flying and trying to work through the maze. Meetings and mock-ups, reports and phone calls, instructors go wild and climb up the walls. You never will make it, the clock seems to say. What I did wrong last week, I'll get right today. Simulators humming, practice the burn. Try staying cool when at last it's your turn. Pump down the chamber, let's see how he does. In the vacuum of Houston, my head is abuzz. 700 switches, the joke is on me. I've studied the system. They're off 23. Simulated malfunction, to us it looks real. They're driving us crazy, inventing the wheel. Crashed on the moon for the 10th time today. We must do it right for the program to pay. Houston is calling. You've lost fuel cell 3. Switch to the other and you'll be home free. The training is endless. It takes all your days, but then comes the flight, and you find it all pays. So then, after all this training, we get ready for launch. Blast off, fast off, sky clear, launch here, speed up, straight up. Lights flash, controls thrash. Vibrations, palpitations, a fragile link just here to think. This wasn't intended, something becoming extended. Stop, stop, stages drop, on we soar, engines roar. Smoother ride, vacuum outside, horizon in view, launch phase is through. And here's another one that I wrote. It's nerves. The task is here now. Stay cool, they won't know. And then it will be too late. I know I can do it. A vibration, a roar, motion, shaking, rattling, we lift straight up. Lights flash, panel moves, floating in nothingness. Then softly, softly, the motion begins again. Push up the switch. Suddenly, light is everywhere. Slowly, softly, as in a dream, streaking down, trying to return too fast. Lashes again, only more gentle. Relief, everything works. Is it possible? Man is a fragile thing trying to return. Didn't we realize that? Faster, faster, but only in numbers. There's no speed, no motion. Where are we? This is a mistake. Am I the only one that cares? Upside down, trying to fall off the edge of the earth. We've got to go on, compelled by God knows what, to find answers and rocks. And then nothing. Lights stop, hearts start. In one monstrous moment, we are in orbit. That's launch. We spent 3.5 days going to the moon. I'm not sure what we've got coming up here. But I spent 3 days in lunar orbit by myself, 6 days with altogether with Dave and Jim in there for 3 days. And it's a kind of a weird feeling being inside a spacecraft where you're kind of floating around and going from one side to the other and doing whatever you got to do, knowing that you're not in free fall, or you are in free fall. You're not in zero gravity. If anybody's ever heard the term zero gravity, please erase that from your mind. There is no such thing. Everything is dependent on gravity. Going to the moon is dependent on gravity. We leave the Earth because of, and it takes a lot of velocity, a lot of speed, because we got to get out there against Earth's gravity. But we get so far out, a moon's gravity becomes greater, and that pulls us in the backside, and we are then captive to the moon's gravity. So there's a difference in seeing all of this when you're on a flight. You see things a little differently. Floating effortlessly, freely. Magnet drawn to a target in the blackness, we venture. Moving easily in the confines of our small world, sustaining life. Stars in slow ballet pirouette, passive thermal control, we barbecue to the moon. We believe we can illuminate our history by visiting this ancient, lovely sphere. What value is this flight in a hostile ocean to an alien shore? What can the living learn from the dead? Slowly, the lunar disk slides by the window, familiar but much larger. And then the Earth drifts into sight. And of all the stars, moons, and planets, of all I can see or imagine, this is the most beautiful. All the colors of the universe focused on one small globe, and it is our home, our refuge. Now I know why I'm here. Not for a closer look at the moon, but to look back at our home, the Earth. And I think that's very true of most of the people who went to the moon, is that, as Bill Anders said from Apollo 8, we went to explore the moon, but what we really did was look back at the Earth. We found the Earth. And what's it like in lunar orbit? Well, maybe this will kind of give you, I'm trying to give you a kind of a mental or emotional or philosophical idea of what space flight is like. And that's why I put it into poetry, because that's That, to me, poetry is a shorthand a way of saying something that gets right to the point. This poem is called Quietly Like a Night Bird. Quietly like a night bird, floating, soaring, wingless, we glide from shore to shore, curving and falling, but not quite touching. Earth, a distant memory, seen in an instant of repose, crescent-shaped, ethereal, beautiful. I wonder what part is home, but I know it doesn't matter. The bond is there in my mind and memory. Earth, a small, bubbly balloon hanging delicately in the nothingness of space. Down here, we argue of race and ideology and other trivia. I am a part of it, and yet apart from it. From here, they seem all encapsulated in a prison where important philosophies go unnoticed while wars rage. Can man look outside this narrow window on life? From here, it has never seemed clearer. We cannot escape that shrouded orb. Pull together, push together, embrace your fellow man. There is no other way to survive. Instantly and without warning, the sun is switched off and I'm in darkness. I look below to Aristarchus and Prince. What earthly light makes them glow and approach out of the void? Luminescent, they march towards me, rotating, 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 then sliding past, effortlessly, marvelously. What a marvel of mankind that I'm here at all. How incredible of conception and execution. The technical wonder of an age that turns on poverty, needy mothers in Vietnam. Hopeless? Maybe man is inspired to reach out this way so he won't see his feet stuck in the mud. The light of earth still shines on me so far away. Will I really return? Will this cold mechanical box survive long enough? Complete darkness enfolds my body and my soul. The next step is out there. Out there stars shine, pieces of light, a pattern of so much brilliance that I'm honored even here. Now the light is suspended between darknesses, stretching from side to side like billowing waves, almost fluttering. I glide upward, above the waves of Ocean Moon. She is forever moving, just out of reach, and I sail on, never touching, only watching and wanting to know. Now the light is blinding, huge, filling my mind and stopping all thought. Now I can see where I am going, and I am impatient to get there. What will I see? The wounds of ageless strife, the anguish of cooling and petrifying, the punctures of an infinity of collisions. No signs of healing or love or care or compassion. She is not healed. All the scars are there from birth, poor lady of the night. But we love her, and she knows it full well, for she's been faithful all these years. And what are the scars on planet Earth? Will she heal her wounds, love her friends, have compassion for the hurt and sick? Or will she end up like the lifeless old moon, revolving slowly, hanging naked in the sky? Life is too precious to let ego-centered ideas snuff it out. The moon must teach us, not only of age and geology, but of life, else we end up like her. And one more. One more. While in lunar orbit, sliding silvery wings through day-night light, barely turning, edging onto new worlds, tranquility on the surface, anxiety within. Conquering the mountain of space is not for the weak-hearted. Spinning Earth in view, home plate port, calls forth the question, why climb this hill? Because it's there is not enough. Compelled by forces inexorable yet comprehensible, like the tick of a clock, study the history in rocks, and we learn more about our own planet and all the others. One thing becomes clear when floating 240,000 miles from home. God did it all. I'm not quite sure where we are, but let's try one more. Say to me no more Apollo.
Say to me, the job is done. Then I say your words are hollow, for the work has just begun. Say to me, we are unknown. Say to me, nobody cares. Then I will show you Moonstone locked up for our heirs. Say to me, we need the money just to feed the poor and more. And I'll say to you, that's funny. It's for them that we explore. Say to me, we should be fighting. Say to me, the world's at war. Then I say, we are uniting people tired of war and more. Say to me, there's too much danger. Say to me, we could be lost. Then I say, I'm no stranger to the danger. That's the cost. Say to me, the world is dying. Ready for the last hurrah, I cry, you fool, keep trying. We must find our Shangri-La. So we go on through the flight. I'm there for 3 days by myself, and I gotta see if we can work this out. Dave and Jim come back up into Luna River after 3 days. We have a little meeting by radio between the lunar module and the command module. And at the end of all the picture taking, because we're tourists up there, right? Dave says, okay, let's dock. And I say, no, Dave, I don't think we ought to dock yet. We have some things to discuss. Dave and I didn't always agree on things, so there was always a little bit of a bone of contention between us. And he fully knew that I was the one who could come home, so that was a very quick conversation. We started back home in about 50,000 miles this side of the moon. I did an extravehicular activity, a spacewalk, and that was to recover some film canisters that were in an open bay back in the service module. We were the first ones to carry this. Umbilicals, breaking free, being born, eternity. Growing up, getting wise, being worldly, no surprise. Learn to fly, getting wings, rise above those worldly things. Something special comes along. Go to moon, as in the song. Umbilicals, EVA, out the hatch in light of day. Far away, Mother Earth floats along, watching birth. Cycle over, doing fine. I was born at 39. And I believe I have another one here, if I can pull it out here. No, I guess that's it. Okay, so we're on our way home. Oh, I wrote a little, something that might resonate a little bit. I wrote what's called a haiku, which is a very short, 4 or 5 word kind of thing that describes something. And my description of a spacewalk is it's like being let out for Moby Dick by a swim at night. I was alongside this command service module in darkness, and it's white. And it did look like a big whale. And I'm floating around outside. So that's what a haiku is all about. Now I'm going to talk about something else, I think. I've got, here's the spacewalk. This is a very famous painting that's here at the Air and Space Museum, if you get a chance to see it. This was done by Pierre Millon. I'll give you a little background of why. When I did the EVA, I tried very hard to get permission to carry a camera outside. And I was turned down because they could think of no reason why I needed a camera. Well, when I got out there, I found there were lots of reasons to have a camera. For instance, some scorching on the side of the service module that nobody had anticipated, which became very important. So anyway, when I came back, I had to have the scene painted, and we got a hold of Pierre Millon, and he painted this scene. That's Jim Irwin in the hatch, and you can see me very small in his visor. That's me, okay, with the moon behind. And that's a very famous painting, and it's now here on display at the Air and Space Museum. I wanted to, something happened to our slides, guys. Oh yeah, here we go. This happens to be Pete Conrad. And I want to say something about Apollo 12. Because as you know, today is the 50th anniversary of their launch. Apollo 12 was a phenomenal flight. They did something very, very precise. You know, the whole program from Mercury to Gemini to Apollo, every flight was something more. Something got added on every flight. So every flight became more important and more challenging and more difficult. Apollo 12, after Neil landed Apollo 11, and he was given wide latitude in where he could land, Pete was given a goal of landing on a specific spot that was within walking distance of an old remote surveyor that was sitting on the lunar surface. And he did. Amazing. I'll also have to tell you that back in those days, we had lots of talks about who was going to make the first landing. And there are a lot of us that thought Pete Conrad would do it. Because when you fly something for the first time, you go all the way, you know, all kinds of things can happen. And there's always a chance that Neil couldn't land. In fact, he almost got to that point on his flight with a computer glitch that he had. So there were some problems on 11. But he did successfully take over manually and land, and then Pete became the second commander to land. But we sort of had our money on Pete. Now, I was a backup for Dick Gordon, but we got to know Pete and Dick and Al Bean quite well. And they were wonderful guys. They were like a family. They were like three brothers. If you saw one, you saw them all. They painted their cars all the same color. Navy colors, gold and black or something like that. Whatever. We couldn't stand that. But in my mind, Pete was kind of the icon for my hero, okay? He and Dick both. They were my heroes. And so I wrote this, and this doesn't exactly describe them because I got a little bit carried away, but it's pretty close. What are heroes? Bits of steel and bronze and silver you can feel. With steady eye and chiseled chin, iron muscle, leather skin. Their marvels are for all to see. They step where others dare not be. To save us all from anarchy or monarchy or democracy. Do not question their master plan or try to psych the middle man because he has a hollow brain and tarnishes quickly in the rain. What are explorers? Men who are bold, who strive and struggle in the cold to find a peace not yet recovered, to find a peace not yet discovered, to return a treasure not yet recovered, to place their name upon a feature or assign it to some newfound creature. The world is always far away in the mind of this marvelous man of clay because he's not involved, you see, in the problems of humanity. And so he shuns society while craving notoriety. What are pilots? Men of wings who soar in space and do the things that earthbound mortals would not try because they think God's in the sky. So pilots do their daring feats in the air and under the sheets as their reward for taking flight keeps them awake most every night. These men, any pilots in the group? These men of fearless flying skill have no conscience, but the thrill of conquest burns them deep, regardless of those at home that weep. What are astronauts? What am I? Hero, pilot, explorer. In love with myself and with my work, unheeding the many dangers that lurk. In outer space or here on earth, I accept all as do my birth. Magnificent performance on lunar surface belies my need of an earthly purpose. Accepting gifts as my just reward. Taking gray money to be on the board. I do my job way out in space, but God forgive the friends erased. Yeah, that's truer than you might think. Oh, here's the one on Pete. I'm not going to do that. All right, I'm going to leave with this last one. This is probably my favorite. Probably one I think about the most. And it's all about, why do we go in space? What is it about space? What's driving us into space? Well, I have my own ideas about that, but I think Exploring is down the list on that. I think that's part of it. I think technology development is part of that. But I think getting ready to go somewhere else when we can't live here anymore is the most important part. And we don't even realize it. We don't even understand that there's a genetic drive for us to find a way to survive as a species when all hell breaks loose here. Every living creature on Earth has that survival as the major imperative. You can't name a single thing that's alive that doesn't have a mechanism for spreading its seeds so that the parent never dies out. Okay? That's kind of what this is all about. In the distance, barely seen, the thin horizon knifes between the ocean and the sky. I know I could reach it if I had wings to fly. Then gazing upwards, far away, the stars and planets dance and play in an infinite ocean of space. Like sirens of old, they beckon me to join in their embrace. Close at hand, the pelicans pass as wind whispers softly through the grass and waves gently stride upon the beach. The world is calm and peaceful, no further than my reach. How can I leave this lovely place to venture forth in outer space? Consider the dangers I might find exploring Ganymede, another question in my mind. While I love the scene around, my mind imagines without bound why I feel the call to roam. Could it be a lunar flight is one small step towards home? Thank you very much. All right. Now it's your chance.
Is this on? Maybe not. Hello? Yes.
Yeah, there you are.
Thank you. I was going to say for those stories, but really thank you for the poetry. I think that was a real special treat. Thank you for that.
Well, I have to tell you that I think most times when astronauts get out, they talk about the flight. They talk about the technical stuff. They talk about launch, and they talk about how to get to the moon and what they did when they get to the moon, what they come back. And I've probably given that kind of talk 1,000 times. So I thought I'd do something a little different to give you a little bit more understanding of what's going through my mind during the flight, not just what the flight was all about.
Very good. Well, we do have some time for questions, and so fair warning, you might get some technical ones about the flight. But
I don't have as many patches as you got.
you only need one patch. You only need one patch. One patch to follow. So we're going to go ahead and accept questions. If you have any, go ahead and go to the aisle and come down so we can get it on the microphone, and then it'll get out to our digital audience. But while folks are finding their way, let me ask one question, if I may. So in flying F-14s in the Navy, many of us thought the most... yeah, I know. That other service. But many of us thought that the most stressful point of the flight on the airframe was the catapult shot. And then we thought the most stressful point of the flight on the pilot was landing aboard the ship.
I would agree with that.
Well, coming back
that'd be
at you,
terrible.
the question I guess I would have for you is, in looking back on your flight, what was the most stressful point? Is there a point that stands out as being the most stressful?
Not much stress, actually. You know, I think stress, and I'm sure you understand. I think stress is a function of how much training you have too. It's like the first time you ride a bicycle, pretty stressful. After you've ridden a bicycle 6 months, it's pretty well routine. Driving a car, same way. Flying an airplane, same way. It's all a function of how long you've been doing it, how much time you've been doing it, that you become more and more comfortable with it. I'm not sure that you'd ever get comfortable landing on a carrier, but you know that's something else that you.
I guess I didn't have enough
something else you
training
Navy
because
guys
I was
gotta
always
do.
stressful landing aboard the ship at night.
But I have to tell you that I think as a crew, we pretty much decided before the flight that we're gone. We're not coming back. Okay? And if you envision the worst thing that can happen to you, and it doesn't, then everything's gravy. Okay?
It's all uphill from
So you say, well, I'm probably going to die out there. And you don't, you come back. But that is kind of the basis of being comfortable with what you're doing, because you're really to a point where it doesn't make any difference whether you come back or not. And so you become great. I was asleep before launch. I went to sleep. And they woke me up 15 minutes before launch to go. That's how stressful I was.
Well, you're actually a Navy man at heart then, because we sleep any chance we get.
I do too.
Okay,
Absolutely.
well, I think we got a few
Okay.
folks lining up for questions over here to our left.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for your service to our country. And I would like, my question is, your poetry was beautiful, and I've never heard poetry like that before about space and your experiences. So I wonder if you've published that poetry, or if you would consider publishing it.
Yes. As a matter of fact, that poetry was published in 1974. But it's coming back, and we're going to republish. So hopefully, and there's a lot more. What I read today is only a part of what's in the book, and it's only going to be a very small part of what's in the new book. So I'm back at it again. The original. Let me tell you about the original book of poetry, though. The title of the book is "Hello Earth: Greetings from Endeavor," and I'll tell you where that title comes from. This gentleman sitting right down here. Hello Earth, greetings from Endeavor. We wanted to do something a little different on our flight. That most flights are. The guys come around and they get, uplink and downlink, and they're talking and doing this and that. We wanted to do something on the flight that made it more human, that there was a human element in it. So Farouk suggested that we take this phrase, "Hello Earth, greetings from Endeavor," and then he very kindly transposed that into how many languages? 10? 10 languages. All the way from Chinese to Arabic to Italian to French. And that's the centerpiece in the book. But I had that with me on the flight, and every time I came around the side of the moon and made initial contact with Houston, I quoted one of those foreign languages. And we did that on every single revolution for 75 times. Wow. So that's the nice thing about the book called Hello Earth. I don't know what we'll name the next book. It may be just republished, but I would love to keep Farouk's words.
I'm sure many of us will buy that when it hits the press. Over here to my right.
A question from my brother. What do you think is the most interesting development in space exploration since the Apollo days?
The most interesting thing in space exploration since the Apollo days?
By the way, we have a shuttle astronaut pilot here in the audience, so you can.
No, we got a couple of them. Well, they, what? Where are you, Tommy? And Don. There are a lot of. I'm not sure that the really exciting discoveries are associated with manned flight. I think there's some extremely exciting things that are happening out there. For instance, with the Hubble telescope and with all the other large aperture telescopes we got out there, we're beginning to look at other planets in other solar systems that are Earth-like. And that, to me, is extremely exciting. We have found one in Proxima b in Alpha Centauri that is very Earth-like. See, my whole take on the space program is that we're doing this. It may take us 1 million years to get there, but we're doing this to give us an escape valve for the time when we can't live here anymore. We know that that's going to happen. The sun's going to burn out all of the helium and hydrogen at a certain point in time. And if we're not ready to go somewhere else, we're going to perish. So I find it very exciting that we found Proxima b in Alpha Centauri. It's 4.2 light years away. And at today's present speeds, it'll only take us 40,000 years to get there. Okay? So that tells us what our task is going to be. And that is, how can we get to go faster and faster and faster? But I find that very exciting.
By the way, one of our new galleries, Nation of Speed, is all about how to go faster and faster and faster. So, over here to my left.
Colonel Warden, could you tell us about any close calls or scary moments you had during your flying career?
Oh, during my flying career. Yeah, not during the space flight. We didn't have any close calls. There wasn't anybody around except us. Yeah, I guess, there's an old saying, I suppose the Navy has it too. There are old pilots and bold pilots, but there are no old, bold pilots. And I think that's true. We've all had our scary moments, and those of us survived became better pilots because of that. And we learned that we didn't want to do that again. I never had a serious issue. I never had a problem. I never had an accident. I have flown in some, particularly in Houston, flown in some pretty bad weather where it was almost cloudy right down to the, but you see, I had, in pilot language, I had an instrument rating that allowed me to land in 0-0 because of the Air Defense Command. That meant you had to have somebody on the ground helping you, but that was my instrument card. But I never, I can't remember ever having a serious, scary moment, ever.
I'm impressed.
you're-
Never gave anything back to the
You're
taxpayers.
yeah, right.
Another one. We have time for just a couple more because Colonel Warden has been gracious enough to sign copies of his book here at the conclusion of this at the Southwest Visitor Center. So I want to leave time for that. Plus, you've got a 12-hour flight tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
So
Don't keep
we
me awake
really
all
can't go over. But the last couple of questions here on the left.
Sure, thank you. Colonel George Segalis from McLean, Virginia. Sir, I was, albeit a child, but I was at the Apollo 12 launch 50 years ago. And
You were a child.
I was a child.
You know, I hear that all the time. Yeah. Do you understand that since my flight, almost 95% of the people are younger than they were young people when I flew? Makes me feel old. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. It is terrific. As you know, it was a terrible day for a launch with the storm and the craft, the Apollo Saturn V, was hit twice by lightning, I believe.
Yeah.
And you were on the backup crew, so I thought
Right.
maybe you could speak a little bit about the concern after the lightning strikes.
That was interesting. Yeah, I was the backup command module pilot for Apollo 12. It was my responsibility to put them in the spacecraft and make sure they're all buckled up and everything's okay and close the hatch and do all that. It was raining buckets that day. I would never forget that. And I went back down in the elevator, went over to the viewing area, and had to walk across a parking lot, and it's raining like crazy. Nobody gave a thought to what could happen. What did happen is that as they're leaving, they were maybe 100 feet above the launch umbilical tower, when the exhaust from the rockets, the 5 F-1 engines hitting the ground, was a perfect conductor of electricity. Now they're the highest point within 100 miles because they're sitting on top of that perfect conductor, and they're up there 400 or 500 feet, way above anything else, and they got hit by lightning twice. Interesting. They lost all their electrics in the command module, and Pete had every right in the world at that point to say, we've had enough, and he could have aborted, but he didn't. He held on for a few minutes because I think Pete could see that nothing had changed on the launch. Okay, they're still going up. The secret to that is that there was an instrument unit, part of the Saturn V launch vehicle, that controlled the launch, built by IBM. And that instrument unit was protected from lightning, so it never got affected. So they just kept on going. All they had to do was hang on for a couple of minutes, and then they went to this SCE aux all that kind of stuff. But they were able to get the electricity back on. But there was a while when they were absolutely dead in the spacecraft. They had nothing. But they got it all back within, I think it only took them 3 or 4 minutes to get it all back, and they were fine. But that was, NASA never considered lightning strikes before as a serious thing. Now, if you go to KSC and you look at the launch pads down there, you'll see huge, tall lightning arresters around every single launch pad. They got those big, tall. They're way up higher than the launch is itself. So they learned a lesson. And luckily, Apollo 12 was okay.
So 2 more questions.
Colonel, if you could make one recommendation for us Earthlings to protect this rare earth for these young people next to me so that we have time to get our civilization off planet, what would it be?
That's a tough one because I don't see an easy solution. We can talk about environmental concerns, we can talk about global warming, we can talk about it, but that's not, in my mind, the crucial issues that we have today. We can overcome all those things with time, right? My concern today is the antagonism between certain groups of people here on Earth, and that certain of those groups of people have weapons of mass destruction. That's my concern. We may not survive long enough for the sun to burn out. And what we're gonna tell our kids? You know, the problem is that it's not our kids that's the problem. Our kids are the ones who are going to try and make it right. It's the others that have a problem, and that's my concern. I do not have a good answer for that, except that I promote young people going to college, getting an education. I promote science, technology, engineering, math, because I believe it's those who graduate from those courses that are going to have the resources and the ability to fix the things that are wrong with it today. I don't see a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant making those kind of changes. But I think
We don't have
somebody,
any of those in here, do we?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I said last, but we've got 2 younger folks that combined make 1, so we'll do each of the last 2 younger folks.
In space, did you think about going to Mars?
I have been asked that question many times. What kind of crew should we send to Mars? Send me. You know why? Because I'm an old guy. Who cares? I go, I come back fine. If I don't come back, you know, I've lived a good life. I think there's more to it than that, though. Space is a very sedentary activity. You sit in a couch hours and hours and days and weeks, and you don't get to go around very much. You don't get much activity. It's a very, very laid-back kind of life. Now, I'm okay with that. If I was 29 years old, there'd be lots of things on my mind other than just watching TV. But at my age, I'm perfectly happy watching TV. So I'd be good to go to Mars.
So maybe for another day, but I don't know why you call it a couch. It can't possibly be comfortable like
No, they're not.
It's not.
Well, you're in, yeah, but
like-
you're in free fall, so there's no pressure.
Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Last question.
How fast can a rocket ship go?
How fast can a rocket ship go? About as fast as you want it to go if you put enough fuel on board. The fastest we have gone so far, now, the manned program, let's talk about human spaceflight. The fastest we've gone is 25,500 miles an hour. That sounds like a big, big number, I know. But you know what? You're out in space. There's nothing going by the window. So you don't have a clue how fast you're going. We don't, no trees, no signposts, none of that going by. So you have no idea. You have no clue how fast you're going, except you see it on an instrument that says 25,500 miles an hour. Oh my God, we're going that fast, yeah. But there's no limit to how fast we can go if we had the right propulsion system. But we don't have the propulsion that will go to the speeds that we need to go to. That is to be developed yet.
Please join me in thanking Colonel Worden for what a memorable evening.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And if, just a couple things before we adjourn. Let me, if I may, we were talking about speed a moment ago, make a shameless plug because you are fans of Air and Space. And I want to let you know that we've got a lecture coming up December 9th at 8 p.m. And we have a panel of experts talking about the legacy of Concorde and the future of supersonic passenger aircraft. So we hope many of you, if not all of you, will join us here for that program sponsored by GE Aviation. Again, Colonel Worden will be signing copies of his book, and please, in the interest of time and fairness to all, don't bring up other stuff, ball caps and the other. If you want a signature, his book, it'll be for sale. And please go exit up the left and right sides, and we'll meet you down at the Visitor Center. And again, thank you for joining us for what was truly a memorable and special evening. Good night.